Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is the 13th of September 2022. These are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We'll begin with the latest as far as the flood situation is concerned. Now, Pakistan is reaping the fruits of the effects of climate change. Well, I wouldn't call them fruits, but of course the disastrous effects of climate change that the world has been participating in since quite some time. Although Pakistan is the least of the carbon emitters, it is the most vulnerable of the countries affected by climate change. This is also something that has been said very recently by Shehbaz Sharif Sahab, our Premier, while talking to the President of Interparliamentary Union, Duarte Pacheco. He said the massive economic damage that has been caused by these massive floods across Pakistan, on top of the economic crisis that Pakistan is currently facing and engulfed in, has undermined Pakistan's SDGs. At the same time, we also know of all the different countries that are helping Pakistan through humanitarian aid, through the different flights that are coming, through the different kinds of aids that are also being given directly and indirectly through the NGOs. We will be talking about that and how important is it to help the people in need in different manners possible. In our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, we will be talking about Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, where Indian troops in their fresh act of state terrorism have again martyred another Kashmiri youth in Shopania district. Every single day or every second day we hear of either incarcerations or murders or some kind of torture or violence being perpetrated on the people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Will this ever end? Also, the Indian government has set up FM radio stations near the line of control to wage a propaganda against Pakistan. Nothing new there as well, whether it be hybrid warfare or other forms of propaganda. This is what has been going on in India and Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This is going to be our second segment. Then we'll be talking about polio. Now, polio has resurfaced, ladies and gentlemen, in Pakistan since the last 1 year. We've gotten a lot of cases, around 18 cases across Pakistan in the last 1 year. Of late, a 3-month-old child has been found to be paralyzed in North Waziristan. Not only that, in Sindh also, we've gotten to know of the first case that has been reported in the province. Now, this is going to create a very alarming situation as far as Pakistan and polio is concerned, because as of now, only Pakistan and Afghanistan are the two countries that have cases of polio across the world. Then we'll be talking about Armenia and Russia. The violence between these two countries has stepped up, and on the one hand, Armenia and Russia are siding with each other and have decided to work together as far as this conflict is concerned, which leaves Azerbaijan and the rest of the world. How is all this going to play out? Already we have Russia and Ukraine, the crisis there as well. Will the Armenia-Azerbaijan also play out to be a major crisis in the region? This is going to be our next story. And finally, we will be talking about our Premier Shehbaz Sharif Sahab, who has conveyed his sincere good wishes to King Charles III. He has acceded to the throne of the British monarchy. Also, Queen Elizabeth II, after 70 years of reign, has passed away at the age of 96, and now her coffin is going through all different areas of the United Kingdom before it finally rests at its final resting place. This is going to be our final story. Let's come and let's begin with this newsroom, and we'll talk about the latest flood situation, the relief and rehabilitation across Pakistan, and how climate change is wreaking havoc across Pakistan. More in the following report.
Flooding in Pakistan has destroyed homes and decimated crops in an unprecedented climate disaster, affecting an estimated 33 million people, or about 15% of the population. Satellite data from the European Space Agency mapped the extent of the deluge and revealed that about 1/3 of the country is still submerged, indicating a series of extreme weather events. An intense heat wave in Pakistan that lasted from March to May caused heat-related deaths, damaged wheat crops, and increased glacial melt in the Himalayas. Although majority of the flooding in Pakistan was due to rainfall, glacial melt has added to the effects of more aggressive monsoons by releasing snow and ice melt into Pakistan's river basins. Terming the flood devastation triggered by unprecedented monsoon rains and melting glaciers as climate carnage, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has made an impassioned appeal for substantial debt relief for developing nations. The catastrophic flooding underscores the growing urgency of resolving international debate over over who pays for the disastrous effects of climate change. Temperatures have risen at least 1.1 degrees centigrade since pre-industrial times, mainly driven by economic growth in developed nations. At Glasgow's COP26 summit last year, developed economies rejected a proposal by less wealthy countries to create a new loss and damage funding facility.
Sarmad Iqbal Sahab, who's an environmental lawyer as well as a representative from the Islamic Relief, joins us online, in fact, in the studios. Sarmad Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's so regular to have guests online that I sometimes, fumble and say that my guest is online. But nevertheless, it's a pleasure to have you in the studios. Sarmad Sahab, when you look at climate change and how Pakistan has been affected, despite the fact that Pakistan emits less than 1% of carbon, whereas most of the countries in the West, at least the major countries, are also major carbon emitters. Is what is happening in Pakistan a lesson for these countries? Have they realized it, or is it going to be business as usual?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Omar. The issue is Pakistan is suffering from the impacts of climate change, not because it is an emitter, but because it is a person, it is an entity which is silent on the negative or adverse things that are being done in other countries. We are suffering the brunt of somebody's development.
True.
And that development for us is causing havoc. And as I say, and as I said in my last show as well, that Pakistan has now become a playing ground for climate change. We are seeing all kinds of devastations, all kinds of impacts in Pakistan. And the world needs to learn a lesson.
But will the world learn a lesson? That is the major question, isn't it? COP26 happened last year. This year in November, COP27 is going to happen. So many pledges were made in COP26. But will the developed countries heed to the issues that pertain to the developing countries, especially those that are vulnerable to climate change?
Well, the discussion about loss and damage has been topping the charts at COP. However, unfortunately, I have to say that no final conclusion was made.
You were there at COP26,
yes,
weren't you?
Yes, I was, and I was like surprised as well as disappointed when the last statement or the last culmination of COP wasn't a conclusive one. We haven't learned from what is happening across the globe, and I think at COP27, Pakistan should be a case study, and people should actually take this thing forward by learning from the example that the people of Pakistan are suffering from. And this should be our prime focus, not just as an NGO, international NGO, but as government as well. When the government ministerial delegation goes to COP, they should be taking this discussion forward and with a strong stance that this is what we are facing for things that other people are doing.
Now, the fact remains, Sarmad, that priorities change for the developed countries, for the Western nations. Will these priorities remain the same? We know that currently there is a Russia-Ukraine conflict, and there is now the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict that is also raising its ugly head. Do you feel that climate change is going to take a backseat?
It's like, if you think that climate change is going to take a backseat, yeah, you're living in a paradise which is full of people who are actually closing their eyes to the impacts. Climate change is affecting and will continue to affect the whole of the world. We are seeing rainfalls, we are seeing wildfires in the West. And that is one indication that the heat waves are there, the temperatures are rising, and they're going to be causing multiple and numerous kinds of impacts across the globe. So everybody is going to suffer if they don't realize it and if they don't seriously commit to having a conclusive discussion. And as I recall, the world said we are going to limit our temperature rise to 1.5 degree. We are just at over 1%. And you're seeing the impacts in the globe, and especially in Pakistan as well. We need to learn from whatever is happening on the ground.
You talked about commitment, Sarmad. The fact remains that Pakistan is extremely committed to providing any kind of relief, whether through measures on the governmental level, provincial or federal level, or through measures taken on different fora as well. Now, Pakistan has been taking its measure, but its hands are also clapped due to A, the economic crisis that it is engulfed in, B, now what is happening in Pakistan also. On one hand, we are told to follow the SDGs, we are told to maneuver ourselves as per the international regulations. But how can we do so if our hands are tied because of the economic constraints?
Well, the thing is, we need to actually be very adaptive and very innovative when it comes to dealing with the impacts of climate change. I'll just give you an example from one of the interventions that Islamic Relief Pakistan is implementing, and that is through one of the funding agencies within Pakistan, and that's called National Disaster Risk Management Fund. We actually build protection walls on the banks of the rivers, which actually saved 3,000 households just in Balochistan.
All right.
The cost of those protection walls was just over 3 crore. And we saved an investment of above 7-8 crore by the communities on their houses, on their lands. We saved 600 hectares of land just by having the protection wall there. So whatever our development schemes are, they should actually be focused on how do we protect these communities, how can we become more resilient by these interventions, and for this we already have money in our development programs, in our development schemes. So I'm sure that we can find more money in our kitty rather than looking at external donors. However, I'm not ruling out the fact that if the commitments are made by the emitters to give money for the impacts that the country is facing and it has to develop, they should give it and they should honor their commitments. And this is one of the agenda that should be taken at the global level. And it should be raised very articulately and very solidly in terms of asking people to fulfill their commitments. And that is why this needs to be seriously brought on every table wherever this discussion is going on.
Sarmad, also there are so many international funds that pertain to climate change and the effects of climate change and help those who are in need because of the effects of climate change. Do you feel Pakistan needs to be more aggressive in its maneuvering or in its designs to contact such organizations and such funds so that Pakistan also gets the necessary help from them?
Well, Pakistan government is very aggressive, and not just recent. It's aggressive since 2012-13, very aggressive. We were the first country who had developed its own national climate change policy. We were really thinking on these lines, and now what was said in 2013 and by the analysts and technical experts over the years has now been seen on the ground in the shape of flood, in the shape of droughts, in the shape of pest I would say numerous kind of diseases are coming in. It's applying to humans as well as to crops as well as to animals.
True.
So it's like we are faced with multitude of challenges, and some of them we even did not analyze. We don't have any cure for them as well. So it's going to be very...
Were these challenges, Sarmad, anticipated by the government or by the people or by organizations such as yours? Did any of you know that by this time this year we are going to be facing such devastation?
Well, climatologists or climate experts across the globe are actually watching and monitoring the situation. They are the ones who are raising hues and cries, and including the organization that I work for, Islamic Relief. We've been here in Pakistan for over 30 years. We've been responding to various natural disasters up from north to the south. 2010 was the biggest one, and this one is the biggest of all. God knows what we are going to be faced with. But in between that, we saw desertification. We saw people move from one locations, leave everything behind, their ancestral land going barren, no food, rapid urbanization, people ending up in extreme poverty. These are the aftershocks of the disasters that we are facing. We are going to be facing food security in the wake of this disaster. And this has been coming out for quite a long time. If we suffer from desertification, we are going to face food security, and if we suffer from floods, we are going to face food security at the end. Like it's millions of hectares standing crops underwater.
True.
And
now even the demarcation between people's lands has been completely destroyed, so people don't even know where, to which extent their lands end and where the other person's lands begin. Then the crops destroyed, then the livestock killed or destroyed, and the livelihood of people, and of course lives of people destroyed as well through disease, through hunger, through death, through the after effects of floods. What should be the methodology of coming out of such a crisis?
Well, it's the national commitment that we need to look for. Commitment to bringing the country out of crisis needs to fall on the shoulders of the people who are implementing programs, who are designing programs. If we are very efficient and very open enough to absorb new technologies, innovation, and look at the trends that are happening, we could be one of the countries that could come out of the impacts of climate change. However, funding is there, internally and externally, and there are many philanthropes, many generous organizations who are willing to work with the...
But talked about funding, Sarmad, the fact remains that we've been told that around $10 billion is going to be needed for the rehabilitation, but the figure is much less. The United Nations Secretary General talked about a much higher figure than $10 billion. Where will we get all of this money? Will the countries, the organizations step in? Because I don't think Pakistan has 10 or 20 or 30 billion US dollars to help it sustain itself or come out of the current crisis.
Well, definitely our friendly countries or friends of Pakistan are the ones who are stepping up their efforts. We saw the call from our Saudi government going out to the communities, collecting money for the affected people. The same way Islamic Relief is reaching out to diaspora across 40 countries where it has presence. We are engaging with philanthropes across the country. Right now, the figure that we have around funding for this response is crossing 15 million GBP or pounds. And this is how we are going to be able to work. However, the only solution is if that money that is coming into Pakistan is taken forward in a consolidated manner, and rather than going into pockets, we are doing a response in a holistic manner. Government,
there
NGOs,
is where the
joining
digital
together.
flood dashboard comes in, a transparent mechanism through which whosoever wants to know where, who has given the money and where this money is going.
And this is a very welcoming initiative by the government, and I believe that we can actually have this transparency in place to show our donors, to show people who are generalists donating to this cause, to see where their money went. And that's going to build confidence and bring in more money.
You talked about Saudi Arabia that has also pledged aid. There is Austria that is also announcing aid, has announced it. Google has launched an international appeal to collect funds for the flood victims. The entire world is coming together one way or the other in whichever capacity it can, or maybe not as much as it should, but nevertheless there is an effort from the world over. What more needs to be done?
Well, actually, we need to inform people what requirements do we have. Our first and foremost requirement is building the lives of people that are affected. And that building lives starts from the response and then ends up at rehabilitating their shelters where they can actually be protected. The second thing is revitalizing the agricultural fields that have been destroyed, the crops that have been destroyed, so that the economic cycle can run again. Next year, I am very afraid that next year we might be faced with huge food shortage in the country, and the government is, I think, very proactively looking at that and looking at how we can import food stuff into the country so that we could sustain the demand. The third thing is that we actually need to talk to the people in power with regards to who fund bilateral programs, that these are the kind of programs that we want. We want a program which is focused on the resilience and protection of our communities and is more holistic in its manner, rather than just one option of doing some kind of an infrastructure work. So it has to be a consolidated work. Islamic Relief has been doing integrated programs for over 30 years in various locations, and as I said, in Balochistan, our 20 years presence has led us to save lives of 3,000 households just across the river.
True.
So, and the same way in KP, in the same way in AJK, in Sindh, but there's always requirement and need that is prevalent, and we need to come together to actually bridge that gap.
You talked about requirement and need, Sarmad. There is the requirement and need of the after effects of the floods that have impacted Pakistan, and then there is a requirement and need to prevent further disaster from happening whenever and howsoever it happens. It could happen in the form of floods next year or the year after. It could happen in the form of earthquakes or other disasters, or in the form of GLOF, all the thousands of glaciers that are there in the north of Pakistan. What if they melt? What kind of disaster effects is that going to have as well? So how should we go about it? There are so many things. Our hands are full. What should we do? How should we move forward?
One of the best things about responding to such disasters is having a very close eye on whatever is happening across the country, whether it's glaciers melting, whether it's sea intrusion, whether it's desertification. How can we have a consolidated strategy which addresses everything, and where we have a dollar value to each intervention that we need to make? And the dollar value definitely requires the backstop of philanthropes, international corporations, donors, and governments to be able to allow the country not to suffer, and to allow the government of that country to be able to provide for their people. GLOF, I say, is not a natural disaster, it is going to be a man-made disaster. Why? Because the temperature in this world is going to be rising because of
But for
man's
no fault
efforts.
of Pakistan, is it?
Yes, it's not a fault of Pakistan, but we are suffering from the adverse practices of other countries, which is contributing.
I
to
really
this.
hope they realize. Finally, very short answer, Sarmad. When you look at the devastation that has been caused in Pakistan and what could happen in the months or years to come, how thorny or how long is the road ahead to rehabilitation?
The road is long, and the organizations like Islamic Relief need to step in to reach out to the people and the government in terms of looking for more concrete programs to support these people.
All right.
We are working with government entities across all provinces, whether it's agriculture, livelihoods, water management, disaster management. We are working with them, and we are trying to address these challenges in its smaller versions. We are not the government. We are an entity which is here to support these people, to support
And we need
government.
more of such entities to be here for Pakistan, to be here for the Pakistani people, to be here for the Pakistani government. The Pakistani government or the Pakistani organizations can only do so much. They need help from all the sides, from the international arena and from the national arena, from organizations such as yours. So let's hope that all organizations such as yours come together and work for the benefit of Pakistan and to rehabilitate Pakistan and to put Pakistan back on the road to economic stability and also stability for the people of Pakistan. Thank you very much, Sarmad Iqbal Khan, environmental lawyer, Islamic Relief representative, to have joined us, to have talked to us about the latest as far as the floods is concerned, as also how climate change is affecting Pakistan and could affect Pakistan in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank
sir,
you
to have
very
joined
much.
us. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and of course the state terrorism that is going on in the valley. Whether it be that, whether it be the campaigns against Pakistan, India is hyping up all such campaigns that are leading to violence within the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir region, that lead to violence towards the Muslim community, and that lead to a negative image of Pakistan. More in the following report.
Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is enduring worst human rights violations at the hands of occupation forces as Hindu nationalist BJP government attempts to tighten its grip upon the occupied valley. In their fresh act of state terrorism, Indian troops martyred one more Kashmiri youth in Shopian district. According to Kashmir Media Service, the troops martyred the youth during a cordon and search operation in Hef Shirmal area of the district. The locals took to the streets against the killing, who were retaliated with fire by the troops. In their malicious attempt to discredit and sabotage indigenous freedom movement of Kashmiris, Indian government has decided to set up FM radio stations near the line of control and international border to wage propaganda against Pakistan and Kashmir freedom movement. Making mockery of justice, India's Supreme Court dismissed a petition filed by father of a fake encounter Kashmiri victim, Amir Magre. All parties Hurriyat Conference leadership has appealed to the United Nations and international human rights organizations to stop India from killing innocent youth in fake encounters under a wicked plan. The ruthless killing of Kashmiris is part of Narendra Modi-led fascist Indian government's systematic genocide campaign in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Dr. Gregory Stanton, president of the Genocide Watch, warned on 5th of February 2021 that Kashmir is on the brink of genocide.
Now, to discuss this very important development that has been going on since quite some time, in fact, since quite some decades, we've been joined by Sundas Malik, who's the chairperson of the United Jammu and Kashmir Coalition. Sundas, thank you very much to have joined us. Sundas, extrajudicial killings, and of course different killings across in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir region have been going on since quite some time. This is nothing new, but especially since the 5th of August 2019, when Articles 370 and 35A were abrogated, the Indian government has launched a new tirade of violence, of barbarism against the people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which not only aims to reduce their rights to a bare minimum, but also denies them the right to tell the reality of what is happening in the region, whether it be extrajudicial killings, whether it be in the form of killings of Kashmiri youth in order to suppress the movement for the right to self-determination in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, whether it be through different kinds of laws that are being imparted and put into implementation as far as the region is concerned, so that the Muslims in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir valley become a minority and the non-locals in the valley become more in number, so that tomorrow or a year or 2 years down the lane, when plebiscite happens, the Muslims, the locals of the region will no longer be in a position to claim their right to self-determination. This and so many laws are being implemented deliberately by the Indian government, and on top of that we see all the voices within India outside of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir that try to speak the truth. Their voices are being muted, they are also being harassed, they are also being on all social media platforms. Their voices are also not being allowed to reverberate across the world. Different journalists are put behind bars. All the human rights activists, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslim, who talk about the atrocities being perpetrated on the Muslims in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they are also being stopped from doing so one way or the other, whether by force, whether by threats, whether by other means. This is a complete mechanism that is going on as we speak. Now, on the other hand, as far as the United Nations Human Rights Council is concerned, we all know that two important reports were taken out by this council under the auspices of the United Nations about what is happening in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir that highlighted these barbarities. Now, an 11-member Kashmiri delegation, which is hailing from both sides of the line of control, has left for Geneva. It's going to attend the 51st session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. From the Pakistani side, it's being led by senior APHC leader and of course Chairman Kashmir Institute of International Relations Altaf Hussain Wani, and during this time they are not only going to attend this 51st session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, but they are also going to meet with important leaders, with the UNHRC High Commissioner, special rapporteurs, diplomats, representatives of international NGOs, to apprise them of the true situation of what is happening in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and the pressure that needs to be put on the Indian government, on the Indian forces, so that they give the right to self-determination to the people who are asking for this right since decades and are being denied this right. If we remember well, it was in 1948 when it was India that itself went to the United Nations and said that it would want to grant them the right to self-determination. Today we are in 2022, that right to self-determination has yet to be given. On the other hand, despite the fact that it was India that went to the United Nations claiming that this issue had to be resolved, now says that Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is an internal issue of India, when it itself had said that it wasn't. Since then, it has tried to maneuver it one way or the other, tried to lie its way diplomatically and otherwise to deny the right of the people of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to say what is true, to try for their right to self-determination, to decide what they want to do themselves with this region, whether they want to stay with India, whether they want to accede to Pakistan. But a lot of people within the Indian held valley want to accede to Pakistan. This is what a lot of political parties have been saying time and time again. This and other laws that are being implemented by the Indian government and the barbarities that are being perpetrated by the Indian forces are leading to a lot of violence and a lot of the non-resilience and denial of rights of any kind to people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas the other Kashmiri leaders which are also present there, whether it be Mehbooba Mufti or others, have been saying that aloud, have also hinted that there might be a chance of the Articles 35A and 370 to be reversed. This chance seems quite slim because of the fact that India does not want any kind of resilience to come from within the people of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. It wants to quash all such activities, political or otherwise, of the people of illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to ask for their rights, the rights to have a normal life, what we call human rights, and these rights are being denied to them not since now but since decades. And it is these very rights for which Pakistan has been endeavoring on different fora, whether it be diplomatic, political or moral. Pakistan has also taken out different dossiers on different occasions and has submitted these dossiers to the United Nations, to different important leaders of Western countries, to highlight the atrocities that are being committed in the Indian held valley. Whether there is a reaction or not, the fact is that Pakistan can only do as much. It is the main role needs to be that of the United Nations, of the Western countries with which India has a very strong relationship, that they exert the right pressure on India so that India gives the right to the people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to decide their fate, to decide what they want to do with their lives, to decide whether they want to live under the Indian subjugation or they want to live freely in an environment where they can have all their due rights. It's a huge question mark as far as Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, and different organizations, Human Rights Watch, Genocide Watch led by Dr. Gregory Stanton, have time and again highlighted the fact that India and illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are going through the worst of time. They has also said that India is coming towards a state of genocide. The fate of 200 million plus Muslims inside of India is at stake. And Gregory Stanton has gone as far as to say that there is a plan to even eliminate all the Muslim community within India. Whether it happens or not is something else, but what remains is that the world needs to understand that human rights are being denied to the Muslims in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and that they need to strive as one in order to exercise pressure on India so that it gives them the right that they have been asking for since decades, the right to decide what they want to do, the right to decide whether they want to stay with India or they want to accede to Pakistan. Sundas Malik, Chairperson, United Jammu and Kashmir Coalition, joins us online. Sundas Malik, thank you very much to have joined us. Sundas Malik, extrajudicial killings of Indian youth, muting all kinds of voices, nothing new there. But this is a continuation of events. Is that dampening the spirits of the Kashmiri youth, of the Kashmiri activists, of those who want to strive for the right to self-determination?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me here on such a day where we do really need some, uplifting words for the people of Kashmir. Because as you've said, that we have been tortured, murdered, occupied for the past 74 years. But it is unfortunate for an occupier like India that they have the Kashmiris in occupation rather than anyone else. Because this nation, I have seen with my own eyes, and I believe to the core of my belief that the people of Kashmir will not give up. They are followers of Sayyid Ali Gilani, and he never got tired and he never gave up. And if anyone has any honor in their heart, they're not giving up. So unfortunately, the world has given up on us, but we shall never give up resisting.
Is the resilience, is the resolve still there?
Of course it is. Of course it is. It grows greater day by day. Every single day we stay occupied, it grows stronger. Our resolve will not succumb to Indian occupation, as it hasn't for the past 74 years.
All right. Sundas, Ghulam Nabi Azad in Baramulla some time back has said that the restoration of Article 370 will be needing around 350 votes in the Lok Sabha and 175 votes in the Rajya Sabha. Is that a possibility?
Seeing as India is quickly changing the demography of Kashmir through their citizenship acts, it is a very imminent possibility, and it is a very fearful possibility. As far as a statement that Mehbooba Mufti made, that this shall never happen and will end up going back to the restoration of Article 370, what they don't understand is that the people of Kashmir do not require restoration back to Article 370. That is just one step. We need a free and fair plebiscite as soon as possible before further demographic change completely wipes the people of Kashmir off the map. So I think Ghulam Nabi Azad, whether that be or Mehbooba Mufti or anyone else who is currently active in politics in Kashmir and who is not under custody constantly, like Masarat Alam Bhatt or Yasin Malik, I think I beg your pardon when I say that they are collaborators in the continued occupation of Kashmir.
All right. Sundas, Iltija Mufti, who is also the daughter of Mehbooba Mufti, says that the Modi government needs to talk to the Pakistani government as far as the issue of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. There is nothing, this is nothing new. Pakistani government has time and again asked the Indian government to come to the negotiating table, and the first issue to be discussed will be that of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. It is India that has always shied from that. Is there some way, some means that India might relent and come to the table to discuss this issue, or do you feel this is just going to end up in deaf ears?
Well, there's always hope of saner heads prevailing, but as far as the Modi government is concerned, I don't think that there is any possibility that they'll be willing to come on the table. As far as the agenda of the meeting is concerned, as soon as they know it is about Kashmir, it is about territory for them, and they don't want to give up their territory. Only when it comes to Kashmir, they were very happy to do so in Ladakh when China came in. But unfortunately, Pakistan faces a situation where they stand with Kashmir and yet are fearful of becoming stakeholders in the Kashmir dispute. They allow the people of Kashmir to have a choice where they want to go. But the real issue remains that this remnants of the 1947 independence is something which will not let India grow, which will not let this region grow until and unless this resolution, this issue reaches a resolution. We saw what happened when India opened up their flight route to Sharjah from Srinagar. It was stopped within a day because as long as they will have a dispute with Pakistan, they will not be able to internationalize Kashmir. They will not be able to achieve economic stability for the people, leading to more discombobulation and more disenfranchisement. So I think it is important for them to see this from a prospect of growth. And if they want to prosper in the world and come out as someone who stands by human rights and right to choose for that matter, then we need to sit down with each other, with Kashmiris, and resolve this matter as soon as possible.
There's another thing that I'd like to ask you, Sundas. Why is India so afraid? Why is it so afraid of the truth, of people to say the truth, whether it be the Kashmiri leaders, whether it be the journalists like Rana Ayub, whether it be human rights activists, whether it be Pakistan. Now, you know what it is doing in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir? It is putting up FM radio stations specifically to jam not only the Pakistani broadcasts, but also to broadcast propaganda from the Indian side. Nothing new there. The hybrid warfare has been going on from the Indian side as far as Pakistan is concerned, not only to shame and defame Pakistan, but also to try to remove any such inkling of Pakistani help to the Kashmiri people. Do you feel they will succeed in this? in muting people's voices, in propagating falsehoods?
Well, I think it is not only impossible, because like me, I personally belong to IIOJK, but my family comes from occupied Kashmir. Whereas there are lots of people who belong to the Kashmiri diaspora, and they have very deep contacts there. They cannot stop information from coming out. As far as resistance is concerned, it is a very, very hard thing to do, as we all know. And when you speak about Rana Ayub, we know how much she is being ostracized by her own countrymen when she speaks up and when she speaks to power. So there is that fear of being charged with PSA or being charged with UAPA. The situation is very dire for the people of Kashmir, not only Kashmir, but the rest of India in this Modi-led fascist government. So I think it is important that those of us who have this ability to reach out to the world on behalf of the people of Kashmir, who have the relevant information, I think it is very important for us to become, I think, twice as active, thrice as active, because we need to cover up for people who have no right to speak, who will be charged, just even something like celebrating Pakistan's victory recently when they kicked out India of Asia Cup.
All right, so this also Genocide Watch's head, Dr. Gregory Stanton, talks about the designs by India to eliminate 200 million plus Muslims from India. How far from the truth, in your point of view, is he? How far from the truth is he when he talks about the beginning of genocide against Muslims in India?
He is right on point, I think. He is not far from the truth. He is right on point. Our genocide began in 1947 with the brutal slaying of more than 600,000 civilians in Jammu, where the majority of Muslims was turned into a minority within a week or so. So the genocide began a long time ago. And right now, we stand on the brink of extinction. That's what the people of Kashmir have to face. So I think countries who are allies, who are allies of Pakistan, they need to put their money where their mouth is. They need to become more involved in the Kashmir issue. They need to reach out to the world and let them know that they need action before it's too late. So Gregory Stanton is absolutely right. Antonio Gutierrez was absolutely right. Amnesty International was absolutely right. Human Rights Watch is absolutely right. We stand on the brink of extinction. So we need action now.
Let's hope that some sense prevails as far as the West is concerned, as far as those countries that can exert pressure on India is concerned, and that the situation changes as far as the people of India illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, so that they get their right to decide what they want to do with the place that they live in, the place they call their home, the place where they have been denied any kind of right to live their lives normally. Thank you very much, Sundas Malik, Chairperson, United Jammu and Kashmir Coalition, to have talked to us about the latest emanating from Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Let's come to our last three stories very quickly. The first concerns poliomyelitis. We know that cases of wild polio have been emanating in Pakistan since the last year. Around 18 cases have been found in different places of Pakistan, especially from North Waziristan, the latest being a 3-month-old child who's been found paralyzed in North Waziristan due to the effects of poliomyelitis. Not only that, there are areas within other parts of Pakistan now, including the first case in Sindh that has been found of a polio. Polio is a crippling disease. We all need to understand that, know that, and also that the polio drops are the only way to stop the children from getting this crippling disease. So kindly help the polio workers whenever they come to your household to give the drops. There is no side effect and there is no other misconception that these drops might have. And secondly, kindly help others around you as well as far as poliomyelitis is concerned, as far as removing all such wrong notions about the disease and of course about the drops the vaccination for polio is concerned. The number of cases are increasing, and Pakistan and Afghanistan are, ladies and gentlemen, the only two countries that are now having cases of polio. Try to do the best of what you can. Next, let's come to Armenia and Russia. Now, Armenia and Russia have agreed for joint steps to stabilize the border, as Azerbaijan and Armenia clashes are increasing. The number of casualties are also increasing between the two. We all know about Nagorno-Karabakh. We also know that despite different measures to come to the talks table, none of these talks have really succeeded. This said, now that we are seeing another angle to it, that Russia is now siding with Armenia as far as this crisis is concerned, it brings back to the issue between Russia and Ukraine. We already have a huge crisis in the region because of that, and now if Russia sides with Armenia as far as its clash with Azerbaijan is concerned, how much more devastation or polarity are we going to see in the world, in the region, as the days pass by? All we can hope is that better sense prevails in the countries that can make the change for the better. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has extended his sincere wishes to King Charles III. Prince Charles, as he was known before the death of Queen Elizabeth II, is now being thrown as the King of the United Kingdom. And he is now known as King Charles III. Now, our Premier has felicitated King Charles III on now becoming officially the King of the United Kingdom. At the same time, Queen Elizabeth II, at the age of 96, has passed away after 70 years on the throne. And her funeral prayers are going to be, her last funeral activities are going to happen in the next few days. But as this moment, her coffin is going through the United Kingdom so that people can pay their last respects. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Help people around you, whether it be as far as polio is concerned or the floods. You can donate wherever and however you can, but do donate, do help Pakistan and those in need, because Pakistan needs you. Allah Hafiz.